Welcome to the Catch Up with Claire. I'm your host, Claire Hoon, and every week we hand the mic to women who are showing up, speaking out, and figuring it out in real time. Because when women start talking, no topic is off limits. Careers, identity shifts, friendships, family dynamics, breakups, big dreams, bigger feelings, and yes, motherhood too. Think of it like calling your best friend on the landline in 1999. Lighthearted, unfiltered, and somehow deeper than you expected. Whether you're raising your kids, raising standards, or raising hell, this space is for you. So settle in. It's time to catch up. Welcome to the Catch Up with Claire. I'm your host, Claire Hoon, and today we are catching up with Dr. Mary Walworth. I found Mary back in January through the Pole to Pole documentary series. Mary is a linguist who specializes in remote languages. In this episode, we talk all about what that means. I didn't know that linguist was a profession you could have. I didn't know how you became one. And Mary shares it all with us. She also talks about her journey through motherhood, being a professional who does a lot of remote field work in very remote locations. Mary was so down to earth and honest in speaking about some of the challenges, but also the rewards in bringing her daughter along to her work and how she made motherhood work for the career that she poured so much of herself into. And of course, we talk about the Pole to Pole documentary, how she was connected into that work, what it looked like, and some of the scenes that had me panicking a little bit as I watched them. Mary covers it all with us, and this conversation filled my cup to the top. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Mary. Dr. Mary Walworth, welcome to the Catch Up with Claire.
Hi, Claire. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you this morning, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, when did I think I reached out to you back in January. It might have been February. I could look. I know it was after New York City's first big snowstorm of this year. So we had two big snowstorms. And the first one, we were inside for pretty much 3 days straight. And in that 3 days, my family, I have 3 young children, discovered the Pole to Pole documentary that came out earlier this year, and somewhere in the middle of the episodes featured your work as a linguist specialist specializing in remote languages. And my goodness, did I learn so much. And I immediately, as I did with most of the scientists and researchers on the show, started Googling, what is a linguist specialist? Who is this woman? I was captivated by the work that you were doing in this show and just reached out and I could not tell you how excited I was when you replied and we're able to have this conversation. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy to. I was really happy to receive your message. I received a lot of messages around that time, and I tried really hard to respond to everybody. But I was like, oh, this woman is doing really cool stuff, talking about being a mom, and that's close to my heart. So, yeah.
Sometimes I don't know how they land because I tend to, when I get excited about something, I tend to shoot my shot immediately and just say, because I'm in the moment, I'm like, this is incredible. I want to hear more about this. And then sometimes it might come off a little bit unhinged and unprofessional and unpolished. And so I try and figure out the right balance there. But like I said, I appreciate that you did respond and that we're going to have this conversation today. So what I know about you, Mary, is mostly through the show and then some research outside of it and then what you've been sharing through your social media page since the show came out. So Pole to Pole is a documentary series for listeners who haven't seen it. I know I've talked about it on my own Instagram because it's a show where Will Smith travels to 7 continents and is paired up with researchers and scientists on each continent. As I said, we as a family watched it. So my kids are 1, 4, and 7. And I loved that we struggle finding movies that we can all enjoy. It's either like the cartoons and the Disney shows that we've seen over and over again, which is great for them. But my husband and I are like, okay, so the Pole to Pole documentary, they were fascinated by it just as much as we were, and it was well done that way. And I just really appreciated that we were able to show them other pieces of the world and other ways of living and cultures. And each episode was so fascinating to them and to us. And we all learned so much. And there's so much about the episode that you were featured in and that I, again, had to reach out immediately. But since then, have learned a little bit about remote languages. I was rewatching the episode a couple nights ago, and 7,000 languages across the world is incredible to me, and I don't know what how many numbers like, if you asked me that, what I would be expecting, but I think everything you shared in that, and then understanding through emailing a little bit, you're also a mother, you are living in Paris abroad, you went to University of Hawaii, which we have a very soft spot in our heart for. It's one of our favorite places to go, absolutely beautiful place. Mary, I am so curious to learn from you this morning. How did you come to this work? How did you come to the documentary? I want to dig into all of it. How has this impacted being a mother? But before I just brain dump all of my questions on you, I'd love to hear in your own words. Can you give our audience an introduction to you?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess, yeah, first and foremost, I am a mom, also of an 8-year-old, close in age to your
Yes.
oldest. But I'm a linguist. So I'm a special kind of linguist that uses language and language data to sort of map back pathways of human beings in the past. So we use sounds and words, and we sort of make family trees out of languages and see what languages are related to each other, how closely related, if they're not at all related, but you can see connections between them. So that's kind of my baseline. To do that, I do that in the Pacific, of the languages of the Pacific Islands primarily, which is a lot of the world's languages, a lot of these 7,000 languages. But a lot of these languages are small languages, so not spoken by a lot of people. A lot of them are really endangered, which means they are not only spoken by small numbers of people, but spoken by very, very few older people,
Hmm.
so they're at risk of dying out. And on top of that, they have not really been recorded or described before. So, in order to get the language information that I need to do all this cool stuff about human beings in the past, I need to go and document these languages and work with communities. So that's my bread and butter, is going to these islands, meeting people, getting to know their life. Obviously, through getting to know their life, I get to know their language. And then I go back and kind of listen and analyze and see what there is to see.
I'm curious what brought you to this work or this area of interest because, I mean, I think about growing up in school, in elementary school, and people are always asking you, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like a teacher or a doctor, or if like you're really audacious and dreaming, it's like an astronaut or like a pop star. I don't know of anyone who is a linguist or who would have maybe come up with this. How did you uncover that this was something you could do or felt passionate about enough that you found a way to make it into your career?
Yeah, it's a good story. I actually just recently, I've been spending a lot of time with my mom and talking about growing up and our family and everything. And just a couple months ago, I found out about my own personal mythology on this exactly. So when I was 8 years old, I did a book report. We had to do these autobiography or biography book reports. And I chose or was assigned, I don't know how it happened, but I ended up with a biography of the anthropologist Margaret Mead. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Her name
Uh,
sounds familiar.
yeah, she was an American anthropologist who I think might have grown up or ended up in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Very random. But she was an anthropologist and a scientist, back when it was kind of only men. And she went to Pacific Islands, among other places, but Papua New Guinea and Polynesia, and she studied cultures there. And I did this biography and I was like, this is awesome. This is so cool. I grew up in Ohio, in the middle of Ohio, landlocked, tiny town. Everybody looked like me, talked like me. very little diversity. Um, and I was like blown away. I was like, this is so cool. There's this whole world. You can have a job where you can engage with the whole world. I want to do that. And so I guess at 8 years old, I just became obsessed. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I remember like being attracted to anthropology later, in my teens and stuff, but I didn't know this amazing tidbit of having this, very cool obsession with Margaret Mead at a very young age and declaring at 8 years old that I was going to be an anthropologist. So, yeah, so as a teenager, I was interested by comparative religions and other cultures, studied anthropology at university, and then ended up in Hawaii and started to get to know Hawaiian people and a little bit of Hawaiian language, and just thought, oh, there's something really present here about the link between language and culture. So I said, okay, I want to go back to school. I'm going to do a master's in linguistics. Just gave it a shot. Never had studied anything to do with linguistics. Fell in love with it. And then that just somersaulted into a PhD. And since I was in the Pacific, it kind of made sense. And yeah, fell in love with the Polynesian languages, which then grew out to other parts of the Pacific.
I wanna replay back a little bit, like, the full circle moment of that I'm observing right here of you feeling inspired by as an eight-year-old, by a woman's work who was out in the field, who was at that time in a very male-dominated field of science and research, and what you're doing today, and, what so many young girls and women were seeing across their screens and are able to see across the screens of themselves represented and doing really, really cool but meaningful work for communities, for various peoples across the world, um, by 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 the work that you're doing today. So you are the Margaret Mead for so
Well,
many little girls these days, truly. Um, I'm curious, can you talk about a little bit? So you said didn't know much or anything about linguistics, went into this PhD program, and it's what you do today. Can you talk about what is that? Like, how do you, I know a focus in the Polynesia area, how do you decide where to go? Is that given to you? Do you seek that out? Are there languages that are very at risk of extinction? A little bit about sort of like Inusi, which you were talking about in the show, is this is a very high risk language. How, because of the remoteness of it, how do you find out about what needs saving?
yeah, sure. So lots of questions. I guess the first one is, what is linguistics, right? So what was I studying when I first did that? And it was so hard because I was so new to it, and all my, cohort, all of the other students had studied it in undergrad, and I was just like, I'm going to check this out. And it was really hard. I had to do a lot of extra work, but basically it's, linguistics in general, it's language science. So it's looking at the tiny structural elements of our languages and what that all means. That could be just looking at sounds in one language and the variations of one tiny sound. I have colleagues who do that kind of thing. That can be looking at the structure, all the pieces, all the words and articles and all these things, how they come together, in what order, what that means. There's people who study what all that means in terms of our perception and our perspective and our cognition, how language and the brain are connected. There's people who study, and I do this a little bit, is looking at how everything we say represents who you are in your social role,
Hmm.
where you're from, and socioeconomic status, and where you've been, where you lived for a while, even if you're not from there, who you want to be, what age you are, all of these things. That's sociolinguistics. And then, as I explained before, there's the historical linguistics, where you take a lot of language data and compare it to reconstruct the past. So that was like brand new world, and I just fell in love and thought it was so cool, all these different dimensions of just what I had previously thought was just a means of communication.
Mhm.
All of this encoded in what we say. Then let's see, what were the other questions?
I know I laid a lot on you at once. I mean, I think just that alone is so that you said at the very beginning of it's the science of language, and you just I don't, at least, think about language as being a science, but when you talk about it with all those different variables and aspects in it, it really is. Um, I guess the next question into that is where it is, because there are so many realms and aspects, how did you find the passion for the work that you do, or where you fit into, focusing on remote languages?
Yeah. So having had this connection already with being in Hawaii and having friends that were Hawaiian and being in that setting, I was very attracted to Polynesian languages and the wider family of languages that those are a part of, which is called the Austronesian family. And that goes all the way from Taiwan, indigenous languages of Taiwan, all the way to Easter Island or Rapa Nui. And I became fascinated with this group of languages, and then finding out that so many of them were endangered, that there were so many of the 7,000 languages spoken in this vast area, um, and that they were so endangered. That was appealing. And then the element of the anthropological element of it, going to work with people about something that's so deeply a part of their identity, to connect with them on that intimate level and to see how their language was a reflection of where they were in this world and the culture and the cultural practices. That was so very attractive to me as this sort of anthropologist part of me.
I was gonna say, because I was, again, just rewatching, and I feel like that's so apparent, at least in the little tiny glimpse I got of your work, but it felt so caring,
Mm.
and you can't really fake that level of care when you were speaking to, I think his name was Jonah in Anusi, and trying to elicit these pieces of language that he grew up with, and he was saying the last time he really spoke this was as a child with his own mother, and I mean, that must have been decades in between, and helping trying to recall. You weren't going for start speaking to me in a Anunnaki, you just said, "Let's start with the basics," and said, "What is the word for this?" pointing to your head. And immediately when you did that, so bad on me, I took 12 years of Spanish
Okay.
and probably couldn't, I mean, well, I think I discredit it, like, I couldn't speak at all right now, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, "Cabeza," and it, like, came back to me when you did it like this, and I was like, "It's stored somewhere, you just need to be prompted and recalled." Please don't challenge me on anything else in other body parts because I probably couldn't come up with it, but it was your approach that felt so like, okay, this might have been a language you grew up with, but you haven't spoken it in so long. Let's just feel it out and see where we can get to. And then how you brought the song into it. Like, it just felt from a place of such caring curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Thanks. I'm glad that that was. I think one of when I saw the episode, I cried like a baby because I was like, I know how it feels to do my job. I know how amazing it is to like have the opportunity and the privilege to go sit with somebody who's my elder and have them share this deep part of themselves with me and all of everything that's in it, telling me about their grandparents and telling me about what they do in their day and all these little things. I know how amazing that feels and how connective it feels. And when I saw the episode, I was like, "Oh man, they got it. They took my feelings and put them." It was really amazing. So I was really pleased with that, and I'm really thankful that that came across to you as well. But it's a very personal thing. You go into somebody's home, into their community, and you can't just show up and say, "Okay, let's do it. Tell me all these words because I need them for something else." And you could do it that way, but what a loss of making connections, making wonderful friends all over the world, and finding those lines of similarity, I think is really amazing across all of these places. It's very, very special. Yeah.
I'm curious, before we get into the episode and the show a little bit more, talk to me about, so You came to linguistics, fell in love, found this passion for remote languages in the Polynesia area because of some of the risk of extinction. What happens after you collect this data and you have all this linguistic data? Where does that data go and what do you do with it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Sometimes, usually when I go into a community or to an island, when I start working with a group of people, there's a discussion of what if they're cool with me doing that. If they're not, then I don't. Usually people are, and usually they have their own ideas about what they would like to have happen with their language. If they want to make language learning materials, if they want to record songs or whatever it is. So I try to structure the documentation in such a way that I can try to contribute to that goal of the community. And if I can't, make what they want to make, because I didn't specialize in making language learning materials, at least I can provide them the resources that then they can go to somebody else or use somebody in their community to make these materials for their purposes. So the recordings are always left with people there, however that's easiest for them to access. But even more important is archiving the language recordings that any sort of recordings that I do. And this is sort of best practices for all linguists. There are digital archives all over the world. There's a number of them, and they promote sort of the longevity and accessibility of language documentation recordings. So these all go in there, and then you decide with the person that you're recording if they want to keep it private, if they want to have the whole world have access to it, but it really stays with the decision of the person you're recording.
That's interesting. So I guess I didn't realize that I skipped ahead on a question as you were answering it of how do you get connected with these communities? Because you said you'll come in and they'll tell you about their goals and what they're looking for, and then leave it up to them. Provide them the artifacts of the conversation and what you collect, but then it's up to them how they use it. So are they finding you? Do you find them? Is it a little bit of both? How do you get connected? Because they're very remote locations. And with that, I would imagine there's also a language barrier. So there has to be someone, and this also struck me from the episode of, John being sort of the leader, I think, of connecting you and Will to Anusi, very fluent in English. And then also, I'm like, how? It's so remote.
Yeah, so it's in my case, I mean, sometimes there are communities that seek out linguists. There are communities that want to document their own languages, want to preserve and document their own languages. That they will, you know, start an initiative in certain parts of the world that's easier than in others. In Australia, there are centers for language documentation where communities can kind of do this. In the United States, there's also for Native American languages. There's also some stuff. At least today, there are sort of centers and motivation for these kind of initiatives. In my case, because I have this interest in sort of the historical setting and the historical connection between language and what it shows us about the past of the speakers, I was looking for sort of gaps in the information that we have. So the language that I worked on for my PhD, which is the language of Rapa Iti, I was like, this language has never been documented and it seems really important because it's really, really far away. But other islands, their stories talk about it. So maybe this is a little key. So I reached out to people who knew people, and then you get in touch with the community. And from a distance, in that case, sort of built a connection and then just went and made sure it was okay, and then continued to go back. For Inusi, it was very similar. It's geographically in a place that, as small of an island as it is, it's in a really cool place geographically in terms of the history of this big family of languages. And I thought, why is this language not really been documented before? Probably because it's so isolated, but this is such a great opportunity to fill in this blank. And there got in touch with the community leaders there and spent some time with them. And then obviously shot the episode as well, and through all of that, created this great connection with them. In terms of the language barrier, so a lot of these places in the Pacific, like a lot of the world, um, they were, part of a colonial past, and there were major speakers of major languages that came to these places and took over and dominated. So there, in French Polynesia, for example, a lot of people speak French. Most people speak French, even if it's not, French that's spoken in France, or even if it's somebody who speaks a little bit of French, we can get by with that. In Papua New Guinea and in Nusi, Norman, the older man who I was interviewing, he speaks English really, really well. But apart from that, most people speak Tok Pisin, which is sort of a contact language, a pidgin Creole language
Hmm.
that is spoken in all of Papua New Guinea. So I learned Tok Pisin, and we were able to speak with all of the elders and all of the community members, and with John too. John and I spoke Tok Pisin with each other. If there's no sort of contact language and there's a big barrier, which has happened in some smaller communities, there's always a younger person who can kind of bridge the gap. So maybe they can speak the middle language, and then they have a language with their elder that they can kind of use to get to answer some of the questions.
So there's always a little bit of agility, flexibility, figuring it out, working. I think going back to the care that's required of we don't necessarily have a common language here, but we can find a common form of communication
Totally.
and piecing that together. It's kind of like a puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, and the agility is really important. The adaptation is like the number one thing for any sort of field work. You have no idea what to expect. I mean, you have a baseline of what to expect with, human beings in a place that is familiar to me. I kind of know what to expect, but new people in any situation, new people, new environment, new language, yeah, you have to be ready to have plan B, C, and D.
As you're talking through this a little bit, I'm piecing together. So we went to Oahu back in December. We brought the kids there and we went to I believe it's a state park, the Manoa Waterfalls over on the north shore of Oahu. And there's falls there that you can swim in the pond or the little lake underneath it, but along the way they have different cultural sites with Hawaiians who provide there were 3 lessons, and it was great for kids because they give them, like, a little workbook, and they teach through and they talk through. But one of the leaders was talking to us about how when he was growing up, they didn't speak Hawaiian, and that their native language, it was almost looked at because of when they became part of the United States, like, it was kind of frowned upon, and they're supposed to be more at the time, they were taught to assimilate into US culture and sort of divorce a little bit from the Hawaiian culture, and over the years, they realized how close to losing their language they were, and to the point where, like, Hawaiian wasn't even offered as a language in school. And now it is brought back, and my cousin married a woman from Micronesia. They met over in, doing service work, over in, the Polynesian area, um, and my family grew up in St. Louis, also very landlocked, also, a lot of people who look and think and talk like us. And when they decided to, they got married where they were going to raise a family, they said, well, Hawaii is kind of halfway between where she grew up in Micronesia and St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah.
But their girls now speak Hawaiian and are learning Hawaiian culture. And I'm thinking about this because of what you were saying of where, if we don't work to preserve and value these languages and the culture, and then they just die off. And like, what a disservice to the people who are from there, the people who are living there, and then visitors getting to learn about it. Like we went and we met with these 3 leaders at the park, and in Hawaii, I mean, I know you live there. every word I feel like is 16 letters, has a multiple apostrophes, and they said the challenge with Hawaiian language is that you pronounce every single sound and vowel. So I was trying to like make it sound phonetic, and they were like, make you like if there are two U's, you pronounce each U. If there's an A and the E, you pronounce each letter as it is. I'm like, oh. And then it's kind of fun to say when you're saying it, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
for
so I'm
sure.
just, I wouldn't have realized until we had this conversations of like a little bit of experience if you are paying attention to linguistics and the science of it and how it shows up in real life, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is Hawaiian is a really nice example of a language that was under a lot of pressure, under a lot of dominance. I mean, a culture, a people, a place that was subject to a lot of outside dominance during the colonial and post-colonial period. And, in the last 30 years or so, the push and the work that people have done to push forward Hawaiian language, to revitalize the language, to make it something that is available in school and not just in school for a couple of hours. I mean, there are whole you can do from, elementary school all the way up to a PhD in the Hawaiian language. You can do a PhD in the Hawaiian language. An amazing example of what can happen in a revitalization effort. That doesn't always happen, of course, but what does what is the product of the same kind of pressure and dominance that happened in a lot of these places in the Pacific and in a lot of places in the world was sort of the crushing weight of the outside on cultures and peoples and languages as a result. And because a lot of these languages have a strong oral tradition, so they weren't written down, and that was intentional because they had people who sort of held the language, held the stories, and they were passed down through generations without any problem until they weren't anymore. And then that stops this transmission between the generations, and then a language can rapidly disappear. It's yeah, if the motivation is there, if the documentation is there, revitalization can definitely happen.
I'm curious, Mary, as you said you discovered linguistics, come from an anthropology background. As you were going through and maybe either applying to a PhD program or deciding that this is where you're going to take your career and your work, did you have an understanding of this is what your day to day would look like? And by that, I mean, you're going to very remote locations for I presume at least a couple weeks, maybe months, you'll tell me on end. And where I'm really going with this is I feel like maybe because we are women, especially as women, not that it's necessarily discouraged, but I would say it's not encouraged. And, we grow up with, find a career or line of work that is conducive to very typical scenarios of, being a caregiver, being part of a family, raising children. And so we're sort of pushed into these directions, sometimes gently, sometimes directly, but regardless, it's around us and it's what we observe. So I know very early on you said you had the motivation of Margaret Mead and seeing her work. So you saw an example that you could really follow. But even with that, it's hard. And so I'm curious, as you were coming to this work, was that on your radar, those type of decision making, or was it you're getting into this work, you're passionate about it, you are just going to keep going and figure it out as you go?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, when I got into this, it was out of interest. It was out of interest and desire to make a difference and do something that was meaningful to other people and to, enhance our general knowledge about languages and this cool thing that us humans do all over the world. I was very attracted by the idea of remote field work. So I did hope that I would be successful, and that I would always have field work opportunity in my life. I did kind of think, "Oh, at some point that'll all settle down and that'll" that hasn't happened yet. I don't see that happening. But when got pregnant with my daughter, I found out I was pregnant like 2 days before I was set to go for 3 months to Vanuatu, also in the Pacific, not too far from Papua New Guinea. And it was really early in the pregnancy, and I was like, "Okay, well, what am I gonna do? I can't really, like, tell my boss or my colleagues yet because it's so early. Guess I can go." I'm just gonna, like, recalibrate a little bit and not do such intense or remote field work, but I'm still gonna go. And so from the beginning, I sort of had this idea of, I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna feel it out. And, you know, this is gonna be an enhancement to what I'm doing and I mean, this is a part of me. So this is just going to happen and I'll be careful, see if it works. And so that just somersaulted into her being 5 months old and in Vanuatu with me again and learning to crawl on the woven mat on this small island, when she was 8 months old and coming to Tahiti with myself and her dad to do while we were on a research trip. And it's really, been something that I didn't think aggressively about in the first place, but once it started happening, I decided this is something that should be normalized. This is totally okay for me to have this important part of my work, important part of my life, and to bring along this other incredibly important part of my life. And also, as she's gotten older, to show her, you know, this is what mom does and this is what you can do, and to show other people too. It's Having kids is not a stop of your passions, and you don't have to be in one place to be a good mom and all of these things. It's been I've become more aggressive about normalizing this kind of thing for sure.
I so appreciate that, and I love the answer of you're just figuring it out of you don't there's I think that's such an important message because I do think it is people are you need to be prepared ahead of time. You need to have a plan for this. And it's like, well, I mean, sure, but also you're going to figure it out. You might be going on a 3-month field work trip and you might feel a little bit differently because you're pregnant and first trimester, a lot goes on. But like you'd also have to figure that out if you were at home as well. And I think the being able to show a continuance of your life is going to continue through the work that you've done. And I love what you're saying about bringing your daughter along for that it just opens up the possibility for her one day of, my mom did this. This is very normal to me and what I grew up with. And it opens the possibilities for what the next generation of women and little girls see for themselves. What has it been like as you said she's 8 now? I love hearing about, I think it's full circle of finding out you're pregnant, going to this very remote location, and then your trip after she's born, taking her back there. What did that feel like for you?
So nerve-wracking. It was like so
So
nervous.
real.
I was so like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? But as I said before, adapting to the situation, being ready to, leave at any moment if I needed to. Um, it was really nerve-wracking. It was really hard, and it was really, really wonderful. It was, so easy in some ways because she was just in the carrier. She breastfed very well for a very long time, so that made things a little bit easier in terms of, feeding and all of that. So I was lucky in that respect, but it was like super hot and she had heat rash and there were mosquitoes and I was worried about diseases passed by mosquitoes and I was just so protective. But at the same time, and I got way less work done, of course, than I would have, but there was so much beauty in it. I mean, again, we're all human beings and we share so many experiences as human beings, and being on an island with her in a remote to me place with this tiny baby, it took 2 minutes before all the mamas and grandmas on the island were like, we're with you. We're here with you. We're like, and saying, oh, wow, you breastfeed. We breastfeed too. And I'm like, yeah, this is cool. We're all the same. And, they were so helpful to me and caring with me. And it also opened this, personal connection door because yes, my work is personal even when I'm flying solo and I'm by myself, but coming in with your child is like, I'm vulnerable. I'm vulnerable. I need help. I want to do this thing, but I'm limited and like I'm a human, and that breaking down that wall really helped me and other people relate to me and helped sort of me integrate a little bit better and the subject matter that, people wanted to talk about, all the different things that I do and then talk about all the different things that they do with babies and children. And that was really very, very special, very cool.
I love how you're talking about this because I think it just at a macro level, and especially like women and work culture, we're taught to fit in, we're taught to be compliant, we're taught to not cause a ruffle. And it's like, don't talk about your personal life or your kids because then they think you're distracted and don't, or if you don't talk about your kids though, then you don't care about them. Like you just kind of can't win. Right. But the way that I want to hear about this support from your colleagues as well, but I was thinking through, you know, it's such a connection point because as you said, we're all moms here. We're all I mean, the women that you were chatting with are grandmoms and have that went to go through that motherhood experience. It's an immediate point of connection of, you know what it's like to be woken up all night by a baby. You know what it's like to be sleep deprived. You know what it's like to have to wake up and perform in some capacity, whether it's for work, whether it's for your children, whether it's for your community. And so I imagine, how you're saying you're going into these very remote locations and needing to build relationships with the community in order to be effective, but also receiving from the community. And I think about, other cultures that, at least to me, you can tell me, feel more very accepting of motherhood. Whereas I think in the US, we still have a long journey to go of full support. But there's more of a community in person aspect of it when, there's new moms sitting around in a circle and helping and, breastfeeding together or bottle feeding, like however it works for you, but just being much more hands-on in the very early phases. Is that a little bit of what you experienced in these communities?
Yeah, and just the general, I mean, and this isn't necessarily the case all over the world, but in the places where I've worked, primarily when she was young was in Vanuatu and Polynesia. And people, generally speaking, really love kids and babies, you know, it's life. And people were, if I needed to do a recording session, somebody would take her, for an hour. And, I don't know what they did. So that was nerve-wracking too, but she would just be passed around and then I'd get her back and she would be totally happy and fine. But, the priority was this little creature. And I think there is a real focus on that. And this sort of care of young kids is definitely very prominent, particularly in a place like Vanuatu. Yeah.
What was it like? Because I heard you say you found out 2 days before or you found out 2 days before you set to leave that you were pregnant and too early to tell your boss and coworkers then. What was it like then, just shy of a year later, talking about bringing your daughter on the next remote trip? Was that this is a non-negotiable, I need to bring her with me? Was this a conversation? Was there immediate support? What did that look like?
Yeah. There was pretty much, immediate support because I was pretty firm about it. By that point, I don't want to say I became militant about it, but by that point, I was like, I'm doing this absolutely 100% in spite of myself and everybody else in the entire world. I am doing this. I've got something to prove.
Love it.
And so I don't remember anybody pushing back on it. I remember the director of my department was like, he was super supportive, but he was like, are you sure you want to do this? We will support you if you do this. But, you know, make sure you are, you have all of the local support that you need. And he and my other colleagues were really good about helping me do that. So, at that point she didn't need her own plane ticket. So that was fine. You know, having things in place that if we needed to leave quickly, that was available, and, you know, having a good padded budget to be able to do that. So I felt really supported.
How has that shifted from early baby years to having an 8-year-old now? I imagine, my daughter just turned 1 a week and a half ago, and from the early days, it was like, "Oh, it's just a baby." Like you said, you strap her in. The only way she gets fed is breastfed. There is no bottle, there's no food, there's, like, such minimal things needed to now, like, my older 2, they're in school full time, they have activities, they have their life very centric here in New York. We do pull them out to travel because it's important to us, but they also still have to be in school. How has that shifted as she's gotten older? Do you still have the opportunity to bring her with you, or what does that look like?
Yeah, she came when she was really little, under a year, and then she came again, a year after, so when she was about 1.5. That was harder. It was easier in some respects, but it was harder because she was running around, and I was like, "Where did she go? What is that in your mouth?" She was eating. She was obviously drinking water, and in a lot of the places I go, there's not running water. There's not, water filtration systems. You have to bring something to clean your water. So that was a really important concern. Making sure she was getting enough to eat and the right things to eat. That was hard, but it was also equally wonderful. And she could make friends at that point. So that was cool. When she was 4, is when we took her to Tahiti. Her dad is an archaeologist.
Hmm.
So sometimes we can coordinate and be doing field work. We work in the same areas of the world, so we can coordinate and be in the same zone, and she can come along and have support from both of us, and we can support each other, which is good. So we went to Tahiti for about 4 months when she was 4 years old, and at that point she had to be enrolled in school because that's the law in France.
Hmm.
So we enrolled her in a local school, and she went to school every day and made new friends and had this amazing Tahitian life for 4 months, and still talks about how she misses bananas from the tree and, and raw tuna just at your wish. But since then, neither of us have taken her on a trip because of more intense school, the activities,
Mhm.
the friends. So now what things look like are I'll take a trip for several weeks, a couple months, and then she'll stay with her dad, and then we'll do an exchange. So he'll be able to do the same thing, and then she'll stay with me for that whole time. But hoping that in a couple of years she can come back and do some field work, because I think as she enters sort of that adolescent age, it'll be really really important to come back to another part of the world and outside of her own life and see something different.
Mary, I so appreciate you sharing what this looks like and going, a little bit off the linguistics course in the
Yeah,
conversation here because we didn't really grow up seeing these examples and hearing about them. And I think we immediately put these blockers on ourselves sometimes, whether it's intentional or not, but it's unnecessary. And I love how you said from day one you were just going to figure it out, and I think the example of, when we talk about like the spectrum and experiences of womanhood, there's so many of those experiences available to us today because of the mindset and example of what you're doing is you figure it out. This is what works for our family. This is what works for me. I put so much work and dedication into the work that you do in the field and with the populations and cultures that you work with. And being a mom is also really important to you. And neither of them negate each other, but they both are fueled and you find a way to make it work because that's what we do. So I really
that's
appreciate
what
you sharing some of those details there.
Yeah, my pleasure. No, I think it's critical. It's critical to share. I'm super open about it with my students too. I mean, it's we have to normalize living lives and whatever those lives look like, and that it can work. You can continue to follow your passions alongside of all of these other things that we do.
Veering us back a bit into your work in linguistics, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I wonder if, as you were going through your PhD program and knowing you were going to be doing remote field work, was it ever on your radar that you might be filming a documentary with A celebrity that is then aired across every streaming platform? Or was this a surprise?
This was a total surprise. I mean, no way could I have ever imagined that linguistics would be, on something like Disney Plus or, so out in the mainstream, which is awesome. And that's totally, the first reason of why I did it was obviously not for fame and fortune, but informing people that linguistics matters and that it's, these things that are coming out of our mouths are really, really important indicators of everything else that we do as human beings. And I am really pleased to have been the sort of spokesperson for that.
What
Yeah.
can you share about that process? The curiosity in my mind goes to, was the field work, were you already doing the field work in Anusi, or did they present that to you as an opportunity that they identified and wanted you to lead? Were you connected to Disney and Nat Geo in the show, or were you applying? And also like the actual filming itself. It was amazing to me how I was watching this. I'm like, there is not a camera person anywhere. Like, how? There's so many behind the scenes things here of like the logistics of all of it. What can you share about that experience?
Yeah, so it was, I was approached, about, 3 years ago now. And funny story, and I think another one of the scientists who was in a different episode had a similar story, but I just had an email and I thought it was junk mail. And I put it in my junk, and then I was, because it said like Disney Plus or something, and then something made me go back to it. And I was like, oh, I'm glad I came back to this. And it was just wanting to sort of pick my brain and talk to me about um, this show that they were thinking about doing, and they didn't mention anything about a celebrity or anything like that yet. And then through several chats with different people working on the production side of things, I learned more about what the whole series was about. And then really it was I was once they kind of decided that I would be the featured linguist, I was really involved in how that would look. They really took into account my expertise, which was great. They had some different locations in mind, and I offered my opinion on what was interesting to me. And as I had said, Inusi was super interesting to me. So that was cool that they landed on that one. And then I was able to sort of make a connection with the community and go there a bit ahead of filming and around the filming process. And so that it wasn't, all just in one moment of filming. Was able to do some continued documentation, um, a bit more than what you see on camera. So yeah, it was really an authentic fieldwork experience, right in line with everything I would normally do. I mean, the preparation, it was not just me preparing to go somewhere remote, so that was nice. There was some help with the preparation, obviously, but apart from that, it was really the norm. Now, yeah, celebrities are not usually involved, so that was something else. But honestly, it if I can say, Will, as it comes off on camera, he's a really down to earth, curious person. And that's the kind of person you need to be in that situation, going to a remote place and being in environments that are not your usual environments. So it was really easy to just go with the flow. And yeah, it just totally worked.
Is what we see on screen a typical, I mean, again, without without the
Yeah.
cameras and Will Smith. Is that what, when you go to islands and when you go to areas, of the Polynesian Islands, is that what it looks like for you? Are those representative? It's very remote, and it's very scarce, but it's also just so beautiful. Like, the people felt very connected to each other. And so when you were talking about, bringing your daughter and the women sort of gathering around, I could picture it because I'm picturing that sort of scene of a Nusi. Is that typical level of communities that you're working with, or is that an extreme example of remoteness? Where does that sort of fall?
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique example. I think so. Inusi was not the furthest or most remote place that I've been, but it was unique in its remoteness, right? So while I think the furthest place I've ever been, physically far away was the place Rapa Iti, where I went for my PhD, because there you couldn't go with an airplane. You had to go on a cargo ship for a couple days. It's very, very far. There's no airport, lots of wind and weather that happens. So if something really bad happens, maybe they can get a helicopter to you, but maybe that's just what's going to happen. And that's a scary remote feeling. Inusi is far, but the trip is, can take a day, a little bit longer, but depending on how you're going, it is close enough that if there was an emergency, they do have help. I mean, when they had the king tide, the
Mhm.
big tide happen in they, were able to leave with the boat that was sent by the government. So it's very far, but not the super, super most furthest place that I've ever been. It is probably, I don't know if it might be the smallest island that I've done field work on. It's definitely the flattest. I've done work on some really small islands, but this you could walk around in a day. The middle is, sort of sinking. It's swampy. There's no height, just the trees and the many, many birds. Yeah, but the situation with the documentation and the meeting of the community, that's very typical. What you see on screen is really what it is. You're welcomed in a very kind way. People are glad to see you. And then the moment of sitting and the first kind of chat of sharing language, it's exactly what you see on camera. It is getting to know the person a little bit and their background, and then this sort of linguistic digging that happens.
Because you brought up these remote locations and access to these remote locations, I heard you say cargo ship when you were going to help me pronounce it. Raba
Rapa iti.
Rapaiti.
Yeah.
We did not see a cargo ship or even a large boat in the episode. It was what I would describe as barely a canoe, day crossing, and 60 miles across the open ocean. W- Have you, Mary, always been an adventure girl? Was this something that when you figured out this is how you access these places, you were like, let's go? Or talk to, because I was watching, I'm like, this woman is playing it so cool, or maybe she is cool. I don't know.
So yes, admittedly, I am somebody who seeks out challenge.
Okay.
I don't know if I've been an adventure girl. Like I kind of, seek them out in spite of myself. I'm like, ooh, that looks hard. I better go do it.
Yep.
It's not always a great idea. But I did, when I was living in Hawaii, I did learn to sail in Hawaii. And since I have sailed kind of all over the Pacific and parts of South America as well, so I have a pretty good comfortability on a boat. This was my first time doing on a sort of more traditional sailing canoe, sailing vessel. I really trusted the man who made it, he was on the boat with us. You can kind of see him sometimes, but he makes these boats in a traditional style. He has sailed them all around this area, knows the sea, knows his boats, and I felt really confident in that, as small as it was. But so yeah, so I've a few people who know me have been like, "You looked way too cool on the boat. You're just sitting there with your sunglasses on, like, peace."
You like were poking at Will for a minute, like, you okay there? And I'm like, are you okay?
I just was curious if he was okay. But yes, people, it's so funny because I felt pretty good. I felt pretty comfortable. I was just, I was like, this is pretty cool. I get to do this. I mean, I had mentally prepared for it as well because I did know that we were going to do that and have access to that boat. Honestly, the scarier part was when you come up to parts of Inusi. That was one trip, but then other times that wasn't my only time that I went there. And another time, taking a slightly bigger boat and then coming in to the island, you can't take a big boat on to the island. So there's certain passes that you have to go through and you have to take a smaller, they call them banana boats.
Hmm.
And the local people would come out and meet you and then take you through the pass. And there was one time where I was on island and had to go back out. Uh, and the weather, the swell was not great, and coming out was dicey. And I remember sitting in that, also a small boat, but sitting in that small boat on the actual bottom of the boat, not on the seats because I was told to do that, and sort of just hanging on and like, I got to get out of here. I got to get back to my daughter, like, okay,
Yeah.
just hold my breath as we went up this like big wave. And then I knew there would be the fall, and we made it. And it was a sigh of relief, and it was all fine. But that was scary.
I know there's cinematography, like artistic added into it for the emotion of it, but when they showed you guys and then the potential threat of the storm coming in, I was just like, I didn't know you were a mother at that point, but like just I knew Will was a father. Like I was just like, they're gonna be okay. Like there's more episodes to this series. But you think like that's a reality of when there aren't cameras and producers and all of the things around, like that is what you're doing. That's your work. And
Yeah.
I think it's a testament. Well, one, maybe a little bit of an adventure girl in there, seeking out the challenge, but also the importance of the work that you're doing around saving these very remote languages with the science of language and linguistics. I think it's incredible, and I'm really honored, Mary, that you were able to chat with us this morning and share a lot of your story here. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
I'm super happy to. Thank you so much. It's fun to talk about it.
It's fun to watch. I was like, can we get a spinoff? Can we get more of these?
I hope so. That would be great. Yeah.
As we're wrapping up here, is there anything that you can or want to share about the work that you're doing now? Anything that came from the documentation that you collected in a new sea, or what is exciting you in the world of linguistics that you have your fingerprints on?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's going back to a new sea. We're slated to go back. We're gonna a group of us are gonna go not as a spinoff, but we're gonna hopefully film some of it. Going back in October to do more documentation work, stay a little bit longer. I'm really excited about that. That's gonna be really cool to do. What continue what we started when we went for the show. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm excited about the opportunities that have kind of come across my desk since the show came out in terms of doing more of, getting the coolness of linguistics and language science out to the bigger public. So stay tuned. Hopefully there'll be more.
If people want to follow along for your work, where can they do that?
I think my Instagram right now is the best place. It's pretty minimal in the last couple of months, but it's gonna start to build up, and I'll be sharing my field trips that I go on, and important articles that are written, and hopefully some books in the near future.
That's incredible. I will certainly be following along. I will put your Instagram handle in the show notes so that people who want to follow along, cool linguist. I really appreciate this conversation, Mary, and it's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks, Claire.
Talk soon.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Catch Up with Claire. If you did, I would so appreciate if you subscribe, follow, rate, and comment wherever you're listening from. Share it with someone else you think might enjoy listening. This is how I can continue to have these conversations and bring these conversations to you. Until next time, be kind, be brave, and be safe out there.